Excellent. We are recording. So, first off, good evening, graduate UNSY students. First, just for everybody's awareness, we are recording this session. A copy is going to be made available for those who are unable to attend live. For the format of tonight's meeting, I'm going to start by introducing our guest who will discuss, they will discuss their connection to uncrewed and autonomous system sensor technologies. Afterwards, I'm going to lead a series of introductory questions, and then we're going to open up the session to a class-wide Q&A. I do ask that all of you mute your mics and that you save any questions you have until the end, and that when we do come to the question time, use your hand raise icon to indicate when you have a question, that or pop it over to the chat, and I'll read them out and call them from there. With that, I am just thrilled to welcome you to the 38th session of the UNSY Guest SME Speaker Series. This is the second of 3 for the term. I'm Dr. Brent Terwilliger, the Program Coordinator for the Master of Science in Uncrewed and Autonomous Systems degree here at Embry-Riddle Worldwide. Tonight, we are joined by 2 guest subject matter experts, Adam Ingersoll, a Customer Program Manager at Overwatch Imaging, and then his colleague, Nico. I have a little bio about Adam here, a little bit of background. He's a Embry-Riddle alum, and he joined the U.S. Air Force immediately after high school, where he spent 4 years as a C-130 crew chief. From there, he earned his commercial single multi-engine with instrument rating certificate, along with aspirations of being an airline pilot. Prior to the onboarding process for an airline, he found a job as a deployed UAS pilot at In Situ, where he spent 6 years as a contractor in support of the U.S. military to Iraq, Afghanistan, and various oceans around the world on board U.S. naval ships flying the Scan Eagle UAS. This experience, it led him to be promoted into the U.S. Maritime Integration Lead for UAS for the next 5 years, which he then leveraged into program management, leading various defense programs for another 3 years. In 2023, he recognized where the industry was heading, and he left In Situ to his current role as a customer program manager at Overwatch Imaging. In this role, he manages 12 different customer programs, overseeing the entire life cycle from pre-contract negotiations through to sustainment and follow-on business opportunities with specializations in the maritime and defense-related markets. With that, let's give a warm welcome to Adam and Nico. I'm excited to turn over the stage so that they can share some details about how Overwatch Imaging is helping to shape the future of uncrewed remote sensing and imaging.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Happy to be here. Obviously, always fun to talk at Embry-Riddle, myself being an alum. I do have a quick company overview here that I'll go ahead and share the screen, and we can kind of walk through it. As Brent said, please hold any questions you have until the end, and we'll get to it. Can everyone see my screen?
No, not yet. Did you hit the green share button? Do you have that at the bottom?
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
All right. Cool. So, like Brent said, Nico and I work for a company called Overwatch Imaging. We specialize in automated airborne solutions that deliver actionable geospatial intelligence as efficiently and effectively as possible. Companies started in 2016, founded in what some are calling the UAS Silicon Valley up here in Hood, Oregon. We've got about 30-person staff. Obviously, U.S. small business. We're independently owned, but we are venture funded because we are a small company trying to play in a pretty large pool. So obviously, the venture capital helps with that. Our payload systems and software deployed and operational worldwide on both manned and unmanned assets, and we'll get into a little bit of that. And we have both software that we can implement on third-party FMV gimbals, and we also have our own organic payloads that we can use. All right, so Any of you that have ever been in the kind of the ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance realm, will probably relate at least to some point to the picture on the top left. That's how ISR has been done for actually a couple decades now, primarily with UAS, but also manned platforms. And it involves a bunch of people watching screens, a bunch of people watching sensors, paying attention to what's going on and noticing if anything needs to be brought to anyone's attention. That is great for a little while. But then you start to run into the human factors of, people get distracted, people get bored, people have to go to the bathroom, people have to look away, people have to sneeze, and in that sneeze, they could miss something that's pretty vitally important. So currently what they do is they just have more than one person looking at the feeds, looking at the sensors. That obviously becomes incredibly prohibitive when we're finding that specifically around DoD and defense, they're having recruitment issues, they're having retention issues. And so that becomes a very problematic thing to be facing. Also, the amount of data that's collected is it's insane. We're talking terabytes of data that can't possibly look through. So what we're doing at Overwatch Imaging is we're trying to transform geospatial intelligence by automating that using true artificial intelligence and automated sensors. And we'll get a little bit into that, but essentially we're effectively deriving actual real-time intelligence from data streams. We are bandwidth efficient. We've got several other advantages, but that we'll get into here. But we are delivering critical intelligence faster through automation. So what we do, and this is just kind of a high level, we'll go a little bit quickly because we've got some more presentation material that you can see this, our software working. So essentially we collect data. We collect data either using our own organic sensors that you can kind of see in that #1 box. But we can also apply our software to a third-party full motion video gimbal. Your West cams, your FLIRs, trackers, those sort of payloads. We can automate to do the same thing with our software. Then we can also ingest third. Using AI, we process the data through aggregation. It's processed on the edge, so everything is done on board. It's not data independent. And we, from that, create maps, data fusion. We'll analyze the data through the AI models. We've got several different models. Some of them are object detection, change detection, object classification. And then really where we kind of make our money is we deliver the data. So we can pipe it into customer systems. We've got our own organic user interface. We can reduce the data required to be able to see the information required. And it's distributable because it's pretty lightweight. So one of the exclusive things that we do, most people think of overhead surveillance as essentially a video camera, right? At your 30 or 60 frames per second. When you start talking about your 1080p's and higher resolution imagers, that becomes really data intensive because you've now got 1920 by 1080 pixels that you're broadcasting 30 times a second every single second that sensor is on. That becomes quite problematic when you're in austere non-permissive environments, when you don't have a lot of data infrastructure and backbone to be able to rely on, like LTE, 5G, those sorts of things, to be able to transmit this data. So what we've done is we've kind of taken a novel approach where we do step stair imaging. And you can kind of see the explanation of that off to the left. Essentially, instead of getting your 30 frames a second, what we're doing is we're taking one snapshot in time, and then the sensor moves and it takes another snapshot. And so now instead of doing 30 frames a second, we're averaging, it depends on the sensor, but we're averaging 2 to 3 frames per second. And the advantage here is that now instead of essentially bogging down the pipe with all of the frames per second that we don't necessarily need to run through the algorithm, what we can do is we can take a much higher resolution image than you would be able to get on an FMV data stream. And so we get a lot more pixel resolution, and from that, we can pull out a lot more detail. So if you look down at the bottom right, this is just one of our, we call it a quick mosaic product. It's an image, or it's a stitching together of geo-rectified imagery that we captured actually around this area. But if you see, I mean, if I was to guess, I'd say that that imagery probably took, Nico, what do you think? 45 seconds to collect, something like that.
Oh, down there on the bottom?
Yeah.
That was a multi-pass one, so
Okay.
that would have been closer to 45 minutes.
Okay.
But what you're not seeing there is probably 10 passes over the city, so it just takes that long to cover that much space.
But from that, you can see the incredible level of detail that we can get from about 10,000 feet. And we'll get into GSD, but anybody that's talked about kind of the full motion video gimbals and kind of the challenges with that is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the soda straw problem, but to get enough fidelity in an image from really high up on a gimbal, you need to zoom in. Inherently, zooming in removes a lot of your situational awareness, because instead of being able to see one large image or one large scene, you're now focused on one thing through zooming. And that kind of reduces your situational awareness. Well, if we talk about this from a manual standpoint, if you're looking for a person, if you're looking for a vehicle, if you're looking for whatever you may be looking for, to be able to zoom in, let's assume you see it from a distance, you zoom in with your gimbal, you look at it, you kind of go, is this what I'm looking for? Is it not? All the while, you're on an airplane moving forward. You're missing all of the other things that you're not looking at while you're kind of studying the image and that you're looking at. So you do lose a lot of situational awareness. That's where our fixed focal length cameras really come into play, where you can search a very large area, and through various filtering in the UI that we'll get into, you're only able to see what you really want to see based on detection confidence, size, speed, those sorts of things. Another really big advantage that we're seeing, especially in the Indo-PACOM kind of area of operation, is that we're going to be in a lot of denied environments. We're going to be in a lot of areas that there are sensors out there that are looking for things that are looking for them. So, for example, radar signature. One advantage of our visual-based systems is that they are passive. So it's not emitting any energy. It's only picking up energy that's emitted from, obviously light and thermal. So it allows us to kind of be in the shadows, so to speak. So that's just kind of a quick overview of how we do. We do have low bandwidth data distribution. And so as you saw that large image, you can filter it out so you don't actually see the image. You can filter it down to where you only see low resolution detections of what you're trying to see. So the system will just scan past it. When it finds something that it wants you to be to have your attention cued to, it will send a low resolution, I mean, we're talking kilobytes in size, a low resolution image to say, hey, is this what you're looking for? You can dismiss it, you can take a closer look. You can cross cue to any other sensors that you have, so because they're all geolocated. So in that aspect, when you don't have a large data infrastructure to rely on, this becomes an incredibly valuable prospect to be able to scan large areas of land and sea, and really not have the data link challenge that you have with a lot of other full motion video gimbals. So we also have our user interface that's proprietary to us. As you can see, you can up in the upper left, this is our fire detection model. You can set the detections up for temperature thresholds, your sensitivities. You can have buffers. There's all kinds of filtering criteria that you can do. Up to sea, for example, you can filter it based on class of ship, size of ship. detection probability, a lot of ways that we enable the user to kind of eliminate the false positives. That's one of the biggest things that we've seen from feedback from customers is that false positives are simply as manually intensive as staring at a video screen. So what we strive to do is we strive to eliminate the false positives based on filtering on a number of criteria and only bring to the operator what they need to see. So with the intent of they have a mission, they're already doing whatever they were doing before. This system is simply increasing their situational awareness without distracting them unless there's something worth being distracted. So obviously all of our imagery is geolocated, can be stitched together pretty quickly along with detections. As you can see, our collaborative autonomy. In the bottom right-hand image, we have two sensors there. The one on the back of the aircraft, the one cylindrical one, that is one of our sensors called the PT6. That is our wide area maritime sensor. So that will continue to scan while the video gimbal is controlled independently doing whatever it wants. If there's a detection of interest that comes up, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, the cursor on target, the operator can pass the target to the full motion video gimbal and cue the full motion video gimbal to zoom in on whatever the PT6 found. Now, while you're doing that, the PT6 is still scanning, it's still making detections, it's still filtering out only based on things that the operator wants to see. So from an efficiency standpoint, you can simply take the full motion video gimbal and jump from interesting thing to interesting thing instead of having to manually scan, let's say, a wide area maritime environment, which anybody that's ever done that can tell you it's tedious, staring at a whole bunch of blue for a whole lot of time. So obviously we're trying to search the market, right? The name of the game is efficiency, and we're doing that efficiency through leveraging artificial intelligence and computer vision machine learning. We do that through our software. That software runs the models and can control either our own organic sensors or third-party gimbals, which is a huge market. We get some rapid intelligence. It's collected, processed, and reported on the edge, which means that all of our models are run on the payload or on the aircraft. So there's no data link required. And so all of that processing is done kind of on the back end, and on the front end, what the user sees and what is disseminated to all of the people ingesting the feed is only what they want to see, which obviously speeds up the collection and detection process pretty quick. We search, we analyze, and report, and the system pretty much does that autonomously based on the filter criteria of the human. Most of what we found is while we could fully automate aircraft control, and we're talking mostly about while we could fully automate aircraft control, there are a lot of regulatory challenges and honestly risk-based decision making that we intentionally leave the human in loop to control the flight attitudes of the aircraft based on what they see from us. So while that full autonomy does and could exist from a risk-based standpoint, it isn't there yet. As you can see, we're autopilot for full motion video gimbals. They are completely autonomous, doing that step stare pattern once you enable the feed, which we'll show you in a little demonstration here shortly. These are just a few of our sensors. We've got two different series. One is the PT series, which is more of a maritime wide area search. And then we've got the TK series, which is more nadir oriented, staring down for increased geolocation accuracy for mapping and fire lines and detections of those sorts. As you can see, about half of the assets that we have on here are unmanned assets. We are pretty ubiquitous within the Group 2, Group 3 UAS. That's up to 55 pounds, and I think Group 3 goes up to 180 pounds. So we're pretty ubiquitous in those UAS. just given the amount of area that we can cover with the detection probability that we have. But we also have that same capability and technology that can be applied to manned aircraft, specifically with firefighting, but we're getting into other various realms. The realms that we mainly focus on right now are obviously it's real-time intelligence for missions that matter. We've kind of broken it out into 4 distinct categories, and then under each of those is several other categories, but we focus on wildfire and disaster intelligence, marine search, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to include search and rescue. We do tactical intelligence for change detections, activity monitoring, people detection, those sorts of things, and then inspection and mapping for linear infrastructure and just overall real-time mapping. We are pretty widely used in disaster response, specifically with wildfires. Cal Fire, we're actually working with Florida, with Montana, and a number of other states to get this technology out to them, because it's just a much quicker, more efficient, and less, I guess, less human susceptible than the current. They do their mission, do the same mission. Maritime search, obviously, it's the same way. One thing that we kind of brag about is that at Group 2, Group 3 UAS speeds and altitudes, so we're talking 5,000 to 7,000 AGL, and we're talking 60 to 80 knots. We can cover over 1,000 square nautical miles per hour. So it's a pretty effective capability in a pretty small package. And when you talk about multi-UAS control, those numbers just start to go parabolic after a little while. So it's definitely of interest to our technical intelligence, obviously, high, fast, and low detectability with resolution imagery that's put out in near real time. Inspection and mapping, obviously, we've got multispectral sensors that can detect everything from flooding, 3D infrastructure, oil and water, just to name a few. And then obviously, while we do focus on autonomy, our greatest strength is our people. Being a small person, or being a small company of about 30 people, everybody does everything and pulls their weight up here. So it's definitely a good group of people to work with. And so we're delivering critical intelligence faster through automation. That is what I had for presentation on that. I'd like to now, are you ready, Nico?
Sure thing.
I'd like to now kind of hand it over to our product manager, Nico, who can show our software in action to kind of bring all of what we're trying to do in kind of a more robust picture. So Nico, take it. I don't know how to stop. Probably the stop share button. We're good.
All right. So can you all see my screen here? Cool. So what I'm going to show you here is our user interface. I'm running this on a little processor here. This is the guy here. So this is one of the processors that we fit into our own payloads. And with it, I'm able to replay a mission. So I figured this would just give you guys a little bit more context around what it is we're doing. So first of all, I'm accessing it here through a browser window. I just go to the IP address of our system, and it brings up this screen here. We've got a worldwide map. We've got some controls and some status indicators and panels set up to allow us to review detections. So what I'm going to show you is a maritime detection mission. So I'll go ahead and start playing this. And right away, you see the aircraft moving along and these images being laid down on the map in real time. Now, if I go over to my detections panel here and I enable a maritime object detector, it's going to start analyzing the imagery as it's collected and placing these detections on the map. So you can see, all of these things. It's a pretty busy harbor area, so we're picking up a lot of stuff. But my job as an operator is to kind of sift through these detections and figure out what's important, what we need to maintain surveillance of. So there's a number of ways to do that. I've got hotkeys. I can open up this, what we call it. This is an image chip. We call that a super chip. And I can use my hotkeys to kind of review these detections. So I can say dismiss, dismiss, dismiss. Kind of go through it like that. Or you can use these different classifications. You can turn these off. So we offer a lot of different ways for the user to filter what it is they're seeing. At the same time, we're also collecting imagery with multiple cameras. So if I change this here to long wave infrared, you'll see the infrared imagery. I can also turn on an infrared detector. And we'll start seeing some infrared detections popping up. So you'll see right there, looks like we detected the smokestack. So our systems work both day and night. And a lot of the other systems that are more for the mapping missions will actually have more cameras than that. So we'll do RGB, long wave infrared, mid wave, short wave, a lot of different options there. But that's kind of the review process. You can see here we're bringing in AIS signals as well. So this is like what boats are broadcasting live. And that's another piece of information that the user could use to kind of guide their decision making. If they, detect something near a signal or right on a signal and it doesn't match that, that could indicate suspicious behavior that's worth investigating further. So all of this software is running on board that little processor I showed you. It's all out on the edge. If your data link drops out, if your computer runs out of batteries, anything like that, the system keeps going. So it's autonomous. It's out there on the edge doing its thing. As far as image collection and scanning, we also simplify that so the user can just select what size of target it is they're looking for. If you're looking for a 10-meter target, we're going to limit the amount of roll that the system does so that you're not collecting imagery really far away. I'll show you out here in the ocean. So if we're looking for something that is only 1 meter, you'll see that we have this very, very narrow swath. Turn my imagery up. So that's what a narrow swath for a 1 meter target. Say you're doing search and rescue. This is about the area you want to cover, because if you're imaging way wider than that, you're not going to be able to detect things in there. Whereas if you're looking for, say, a 50-meter boat, you'll see that now the system is scanning more or less horizon to horizon. We also give the user the ability to use geography to influence where they collect. So you can create shapes and enable those as geofences or exclusion zones. And that just means areas where the sensor will collect imagery. So with proper planning, you can set this all up so that you don't need to even really be paying attention during the mission, depending on what that mission is. So a lot of automation there. Yeah, I think that's all I have to show here. And I guess for now, we can kind of open this up to questions.
Excellent. This was really informative. One of the things I personally I'm really impressed with is the live imagery scale down aspect, where you send the lower fidelity images for an initial review. That supporting your savings of bandwidth and kind of rapid expedited review. In that case, I'm assuming the high, or rather the full fidelity data, is retained on board the aircraft for post-operational review, or is it accessible, um, like not real time, but I mean, can you transmit that highest level of fidelity as the aircraft is maybe transiting back into an area?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of ways to do that. You've got all of that data is stored on board the sensor. It's got 1 TB of internal storage, which generally lasts much longer than any individual mission is going to take. So you're never going to like overwrite that data with a typical maritime mission like I was showing you. During the flight, if you have some time and you have a good bandwidth, you can create what we call POIs, which is a point of interest. And at that point of interest, which is a geographic location, any imagery that is collected there, it'll send the full res imagery of that down the pipeline to the operator. So you can set up those POIs in advance or after the fact, and so you always have access to that full resolution data. Additionally, all of those detections, the detections are made using the full resolution imagery, and the little image chip that you see is the full resolution, but clipped down to a small image chip. So it's like, the pictures of the boats that I was pulling up, those were maybe 1/100th of a total image, just clipped down and scaled up.
Excellent. In regards to the machine learning aspect of your guys' tools, what are some of the major challenges associated with preparing the imagery before using it with machine learning or your AI software? Is there some intermediate processing or cleanup that needs to occur, or does it just go straight into the software in a like raw format?
That's a great question. So the best case, like the best thing we can do when we're training a new model is to collect the imagery ourselves with the cameras that we're using from the scan geometries that we will be collecting at. That's not always the case. We don't always get the opportunity to use our own systems in the environment that a customer is going to be using them. So in some situations, we've accepted data from the customer and trained a model off of it. But as far as pre-processing goes, we will do a number of different things to pre-process that data, including distorting it actually, so that it's not always from the perfect imaging geometry. Sometimes we'll take, if we have some example imagery, we can actually make more example imagery out of it by distorting it such that it's flipped over as if you were to see it from a different angle, things like that. So that increases the total library that we have to train with.
Excellent. Kind of switching things up a little bit, changing gears. Our students they're in this field to kind of either further their career or establish a foothold to enter the uncrewed and autonomous systems field. What advice would you give students who want to advance their skills relative to what you're doing? What cross-disciplinary knowledge is just a must-have?
So that's a good question. Obviously, that there's several nuances, dependencies, those sorts of things. What I will say is, I don't know if anybody's looked at the stock market over the last couple of years, but to say that there's an AI craze is a little bit of an understatement. The industry is going towards artificial intelligence. The reason that the industry is going towards artificial intelligence is for autonomy. With autonomy, it enables the same human resourcing personnel footprint to do more. You're starting to see ideas of drone swarms. Obviously, that is an incredibly valuable idea. So if one drone, and I say, if one UAV can, at Group 2, Group 3 speeds, can cover 1,000 square miles an hour with our sensor, imagine what 5 can do in 5 hours. Again, the numbers just start to go parabolic. So I think that the industry is finally recognizing that, as embarrassing as it is, the human is kind of the weak point in this whole chain. People get distracted, people make mistakes, people look away, where autonomy doesn't do that. There's so many different implications of autonomy, specific to UAS, but obviously specific just to any other. I would say though, with UAS, autonomy is becoming more front and center. We've got the FPV drones that are going on in Ukraine. Obviously, that's a little outside of the autonomous standpoint, but what if you could automate target recognition on first-person drones, right? Now, all of a sudden, you have one operator that can control 30, as opposed to a 1-to-1 ratio. So my recommendation would be look into various technologies and methodologies that will make doing the things that we're doing today more efficient and more effective. Obviously, I kind of did that same analysis. I came up with autonomy. I jumped onto a company that has autonomy as our front and center priority. And quite honestly, I do think, at least in defense, that is where the industry is progressing towards. Autonomy is, it's a bumper sticker word, but once you understand some of the capabilities of the possibilities. So if I was to make a recommendation, I would absolutely say, if you can understand the industry today and understand some of the industry challenges, specifically around personnel, you'll probably come to the same conclusion that I did, in that people are definitely a vital piece of the chain, but they don't have to be, the chain doesn't have to be made up of people. They can just be a single link. So I would recommend looking into ways that you can optimize performance with less resources and less human capital.
Excellent. We see this technology evolving rapidly. What are the tools or mechanisms that you personally use to stay up to date in this space? What are some of the strategies you might recommend for just sifting through all the available material that's out there?
That is a good question. I would say that specifically with unmanned systems, that would kind of depend on the realm that you're trying to pursue. Most of my work is in defense and government. And fortunately, the government is really good about road mapping and laying out kind of stated goals. If you look at some of the memos from the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they are very much focusing on how do we compete with near-peer adversaries. And then they start, if you start to read a little more into it, you can go down the path of, they're facing personnel challenges, they're facing recruitment challenges, they're facing all of these personnel challenges, but the threats aren't going anywhere. In fact, the threats and the challenges are getting harder. So to go back to your original question, for me, it's incredibly valuable to look at what the strategic initiatives of our leadership is, where they think the industry is going, and then taking that information and applying it to anything that the trade shows are showing. Quite honestly, a lot of these companies are publicly traded. Looking at investment news, most of the investing world doesn't really care about what you're doing today. What they care about is what's the growth potential in the future. So a lot of the companies that are making a lot of buzz, look at what they're working on. Look at your Andurils, look at your Palantirs, look at those kind of companies that are effectively like disrupting the status quo in a really big way. Look at what they're focusing on. Look at how they're focusing on doing it. That will give you kind of an insight into where the focus is today, and then where the focus is tomorrow, to kind of keep you ahead of it. I would say that leveraging AI in your searches, using your chat GPTs, using those kind of things, is an incredibly effective technique once you kind of narrow down on what you think are the goals. But just from a summation standpoint, you can ask ChatGPT to summarize what the Secretary of Defense's address is, and from there you can kind of drill down on what interests you or where you think you want to focus your attention.
Excellent. With that, I'd like to open the floor to the class. If you have a question, now is the time to ask. Go ahead and hit the hand raise icon and I'll call on you, or pop your question over into the chat. Don't be shy.
Makes my job easy.
Really, no questions for clarification, or maybe about how your own projects that you're working on right now, maybe asking some questions that can help give you some insight.
Hey, Dr. T, this is Donald. Sorry, I can't access the hand raise icon. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So I guess my question is, how was it difficult to integrate with tactical systems? Coming from a military background, I mean, I just retired here last year. I work with a lot of tactical systems, and we see all these new products coming in, and similar to what you're doing. So, did you find it difficult, or how difficult was it to integrate your mapping software into like CAC2S, right? So your command and control systems.
That's a good question. I think that depends. What we've found is by providing a software-based solution to existing certified regulated hardware, we found our path to adoption to be a lot simpler than somebody that would be offering, say, a hardware solution where you have to drill a hole in an airplane and have all the cabling and all the requirements that go into not only FAA but DoD certifications to be able to do that. So what we're doing is we're leveraging those things that are already certified, your WESCAMs, your FLIRs, et cetera. And we're using onboard compute, whether we provide the onboard compute, whether the onboard compute already exists. So now we're talking less about the hardware regulation, more about the software regulation. We're talking about information assurance, cybersecurity, those sorts of things. And we've actually found some pretty good leeway in the fact that many of the aircraft systems aren't actually connected systems. They're kind of, we would call it a bubble, right? The aircraft is its own bubble. So once it's certified, it has, through cross-domain solutions, it's got several safeguards to prevent unauthorized access to and from the aircraft. So as long as we're operating within the bounds of the aircraft, we're transmitting only, approved things through approved systems. It's really not, from a regulation standpoint, it's not overly difficult, or it's not as difficult as it would be for some other solutions. I think where we face the biggest challenge there is adoption. How can you, specifically with the government, how can you say, hey, we've got this great idea, let us show you all the implications to it? That tends to make various government stakeholders incredibly nervous, very risk averse. So that's really where we're kind of facing our challenges, is how do we show them the capability that we have if we're not able to operate in the environments that they're able to operate in as high and as fast and as sleuthy and stealthy as they're able to do? How can we convince them that our technology actually could have a lot of, they would get a lot. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
I would add to that one thing too that we're really working on every day here is simplifying the user experience. We found that with a lot of these agencies that we work with, we don't have the opportunity to train them, or if we do get to train them, we train them once, and then there's entire crew turnover. So making the system so simple that, you know, it's intuitive, anybody can pick it up and use it, like that's the goal that we think is going to make our technology stick.
Excellent. It looks like Dallas has a question. Where do you see the UAS platform going in the next 5 to 10 years in relation to staffing operators? Came to mind after you mentioned swarm systems. And I believe you mentioned early on that you're using manual operation to a degree.
Yeah, that's a good question. So quite honestly, I've been in UAS for over 15 years now, and it has transformed a lot just in that amount of time. I mean, the UAS platforms, at first people were like, "Oh, great, we don't have to put a person in harm's way, especially in war zones, to be able to conduct surveillance," which was a completely novel idea when it first came out. And so, you know, you got your bespoke systems that had all these really cool gadgets and nifty things. One thing that we're starting to see from a lot of customers, and it seems like the industry is kind of picking up on it, is that the actual UAS platform isn't as important as the endurance and the capability of the platform. What I mean by capability is more the suite of sensors that the platform has, more so than the platform itself. You know, you saw in the early days of UAS, what really started to excel and get people's attention was cameras, right? The camera systems. But nobody was ever looking at the UAS. Everybody was only ever looking at the camera system, at the imagery, at the whatever. Okay, so if you have a UAS that can carry 5 pounds, okay, that's carry a camera. But if you have a UAS that has the same endurance that can carry 40 pounds, now you're talking about not just a camera, you're talking about a radar. You're not talking about just a camera and radar, you're talking about a visual-based system. And then you're not talking about just that, you're talking about various EW, electronic warfare things. And so now the capability of that one platform is now amplified by 5, 6, 7 different sensors that it's able to carry simultaneously. So from a staffing operator standpoint, I would say the UAS market, it seems this is twofold. One is expendable and cheap, as we're starting to see in Ukraine. That's an important caveat because the Western way of doing war is kind of evolving. So that is an important thing to think. Another thing is for these assets that aren't expendable, what they're trying to do is optimize the efficiency, optimize the return on investment. When they spend $1 million on a platform, they don't just want that platform to, they want it to have as many sensors as it can possibly have to be airborne. So from staffing operators, I kind of see the industry going towards, first of all, staffing operators is a difficult proposition. There's a lot of training. There's a long lead time to the time somebody expresses interest to get them through training, to get them spun up, to get them qualified, to get them proficient in doing so. That's an expensive, slow process. And that is the opposite way that everybody's trying to go. So for staffing operators, I think we will still staff operators, we still will have human in the loop. But I think where we're looking is efficiency. I think that where one operator would operate one camera and one operator would operate one aircraft. Now we're looking at one operator operating several aircraft and several cameras with the assistance of AI, or with the assistance of some other system that's able to do that. So in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't expect the UAS operator to go anywhere. What I do expect is their workload to increase on number of systems and number of assets that they're controlling, but I don't know that it'll necessarily be harder for them due to increases in efficiency. Does that answer the question?
I'm gonna assume so. And that's in line with what we're seeing with kind of this distributed delegation authority, where you're gonna have one supervisor overseeing a number of platforms, and they only have to step in when there's either an issue or a decision point necessary. Looks like Christian has a question, and then I think we'll wrap up.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I have a question. With the type of photography that you guys take, can this be stitched by a program to work orthomosaics or to scan big areas, like for research, not for research, for search, like what happened in the ocean when the airplane was missing? So this kind of system can help in searching things like that?
Yes, it can, and I'll probably let Nico take this one, but yes, it can absolutely do that. Where our system is effective is that it doesn't have to collect the imagery, it doesn't have to collect the map, it doesn't have to analyze the map. It can analyze shot by shot and frame by frame if there's something there that isn't water that you're looking for. So yes, we can create a very large picture, but for the most part, that large picture is going to have nothing but water. Nobody really needs to look at what they're looking for is an airplane missing, debris, or humans, or something like that. And that's where our system excels. You don't have to get the entire data product to be able to look for that. The system will search for it autonomously in near real time. Nico, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess all I would add to that is kind of a brief description of how we search for things in imagery. So we're capturing image rather than, say, putting a really big, super high megapixel camera in there. These are like 12 to 24 megapixel cameras, which would be similar to something in your pocket, but it's zoomed in relatively tight, and we move that to cover a wide area. So then you've got 12 megapixels, 12 megapixels, 12 megapixels, 12 megapixels. Then you fly forward and you do that again. And suddenly the area that you covered ends up being 1,000 images, 10,000 images, that's a lot to look through, to analyze, to search. And then on top of that, we're sort of breaking those images down into small chunks that the AI is able to search for objects of interest. So we've taken what would be an incredibly mundane, time-consuming job for a human operator, looking at all those images, and made it 100 times more mundane and time-consuming for a human by breaking it up into even smaller images. But that's the power of AI and computers, is they don't get bored. They just keep chugging along and finding anything in the water that matches the object classes that you've told it to search for.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I want to just thank everybody for joining us tonight, as well as a major thank you to Adam and Nico for sharing their thoughts and their expertise regarding this technology. This has been a truly informative session that really helps us to better understand the challenges and the opportunities with the incorporation of remote sensing and image processing technologies into UAS. Just as a note, I hope to have the recording from this session uploaded to my instructor corner by tomorrow. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you all.